On the afternoon of March 24, 2015, a 30-year-old man named Aaron Quinn reported that his girlfriend, Denise Huskins, had been kidnapped from their bedroom the previous night. Local authorities responded quickly, heading straight to the apartment where the incident took place. Upon arrival, the officers encountered a puzzling crime scene. The screen near the back door had been slashed with a knife, and the door lock appeared to have been tampered with, suggesting a forced entry. The bedroom on the second floor was in complete disarray, with blankets and sheets piled haphazardly on the bed. On the floor, they found unusual items: swim goggles taped shut and an empty bottle of cough syrup. But what stood out most was a square section of the bedroom floor outlined with red tape, within which a chair had been placed, seemingly positioned to face something. Oddly enough, a camera had been set up directly in front of the chair, yet it was unplugged and not connected to the internet, serving no apparent purpose other than decoration. No fingerprints or other DNA evidence were found at the scene, and no signs of a struggle were visible. When questioned, the neighbors claimed they hadn't heard any screams or disturbances the night of the incident, which added to the overall mystery. But Aaron's version of events made things even stranger. He recounted how he had woken up suddenly in the middle of the night to the glare of a flashlight. Dazed and confused, he noticed a red dot dancing across his chest, something that immediately reminded him of the laser sights used on firearms. Filled with fear, his instinct was to protect Denise, but before he could act, a masked man pointed a gun at his head and ordered him to bind his girlfriend's hands and feet with zip ties provided by the intruder. After Aaron complied, the man tied him up as well. The intruder then covered their eyes with the swim goggles, which were sealed shut with tape, effectively blinding them. Aaron said they were forced to hand over their bank cards, PIN numbers, social security numbers, and even their phones. The kidnapper then used their phones to text their bosses, explaining that they wouldn't be able to come to work due to feeling unwell. Things took a darker turn when the intruder made both Aaron and Denise drink an entire bottle of medicine, presumably the cough syrup found at the scene. The sedative effects of the medicine soon knocked them out. Aaron said that, after he lost consciousness, he was dragged to a chair positioned within the red tape square, and when he awoke, the goggles were removed. The intruder told him not to leave the square, warning that if he did, his girlfriend's life would be in immediate danger. Pointing to the unplugged camera, the kidnapper claimed it was monitoring his every move. To further manipulate the situation, he placed headphones on Aaron's head and played soothing music, a jarring contrast to the tense situation. After issuing his final threats, the kidnapper took Denise downstairs and vanished without a trace. Aaron, still disoriented from the drugs, remained in the square for hours, eventually succumbing to exhaustion and falling asleep. It wasn't until the following afternoon that he woke up, cut the zip ties binding him, and finally called the police. The officers who interviewed Aaron were left baffled by his bizarre story of abduction. Every detail seemed to defy logic, making them question the truth behind his claims. Drawing a square on the floor and forcing him to stay inside it? It felt like the kidnapper had seen too many Western movies and imagined Aaron was someone important. and Aaron had sat there for more than 10 hours without moving. The officers were skeptical. The biggest question on their minds was the motive. Why would the kidnapper go to such lengths to abduct someone? As Aaron struggled to convince the police that his story was real, a message suddenly appeared on his phone. It was from the kidnapper demanding a ransom. "See, I'm not lying," Aaron insisted. But the ransom amount, $12,000, was oddly specific. Whether it was a lot or not, the officers found it strange that the kidnapper would request such an exact figure. This made the police suspicious, wondering if Aaron could be involved in some way. Maybe he had harmed his girlfriend and was now playing the victim to deflect suspicion. Aaron strongly denied this, insisting that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. "How could I have sent a message to myself right in front of you?" he asked. But the experienced detectives weren't buying it. They knew about ways to schedule texts to be sent later. For the next several hours, the interrogation continued. Aaron was hooked up to a lie detector, questioned repeatedly, and even had lawyers consulted, but nothing conclusive came from it. Meanwhile, something else odd happened. The local newspaper received a voicemail from a woman claiming to be the missing Denise. She said she had been kidnapped but was still alive. To prove her identity, she mentioned her favorite band from her first concert and the name of her high school boyfriend. However, her voice was calm and steady, as if she were talking about someone else's situation, not her own. This made the police even more suspicious. Who could stay so composed while supposedly being held captive? The police then began interviewing the couple's colleagues and friends. What they uncovered was a scandal. It turned out Aaron and Denise were both physical therapists at the same local hospital. Even more shocking, Aaron's ex-fiancée, Andrea, also worked there. Aaron and Andrea had been engaged, planning a wedding, but things fell apart when Andrea cheated on him. Though they had broken up, the two still worked together and saw each other regularly. Even after Aaron started dating Denise, it seemed he hadn't completely cut ties with Andrea. Strangely, Aaron recalled that during the kidnapping, the masked man had repeatedly asked him for names, and at one point, even called him Andrea. Could it be that the kidnapper had intended to target Aaron's ex-fiancée, but accidentally took the wrong person? Despite this new information, the police remained convinced that there was no real kidnapper, just a love triangle gone wrong. They theorized that one or more people might have concocted this whole scheme to eliminate a romantic rival or add excitement to their lives. Though they continued with formal investigations, deploying search dogs and distributing flyers, their focus shifted increasingly to Aaron as a suspect. Aaron, clinging to his story, continued to insist on his innocence, but after hours of questioning, the police began to lose patience. Legally, they could hold him for 48 hours before charging him, so they decided to wait. Aaron wasn't put in a prison uniform, but he was given minimal food and water and confined to a small cell under constant pressure. Then came shocking news. Denise had been found alive. Media reports stated that she had been discovered in Huntington Beach, over 400 miles away from where the kidnapping was reported. While this might have seemed like a stroke of luck, Denise's sudden reappearance only made Aaron look more suspicious. Typically, kidnappers release their victims in remote areas, far from civilization, to create a delay before the police can reach them. But in this case, the kidnapper had dropped Denise off in an alley near her parents' house. When the police found her, Denise's wallet, cash, and credit cards were all untouched, which contradicted Aaron's claim that the abduction had been financially motivated. More importantly, no ransom had ever been paid. So why had the kidnapper released her? Denise told police that, after being taken, her eyes were covered, and she was brought to a small, quiet house where the windows had been completely covered with cardboard. She said the kidnapper, who wore a black hoodie, assaulted her inside the house. They stayed there for almost 2 days before the kidnapper told her to drink cough syrup, blindfolded her with the taped-up goggles again, and drove her away. Disoriented by fear and the effects of the medication, Denise couldn't tell how long they had been driving, but after being told to count to 20 and then open her eyes, she found herself near her parents' home. The police found Denise's story even more unbelievable than Aaron's. They required her to undergo a medical examination, particularly focusing on evidence related to the alleged assault. Surprisingly, her physical exam revealed no signs of injury, and there were no traces of male DNA on or inside her body. Denise explained this by saying that during the assault, the kidnapper's genitals had felt odd, as though they weren't real, possibly a toy. This led police to suspect that the kidnapper might not have been a man at all. The police began to suspect that Denise might have voluntarily left home and fabricated the entire story to avoid the consequences of her actions. How could a case so ridiculous be real? A kidnapper who didn't want money, didn't want the person, and simply held her for 2 days as if playing the role of a modern-day Good Samaritan. Denise refused to take the lie detector test the police insisted on. She angrily declared, "I'm the victim here. Instead of finding my kidnapper, why are you harassing me?" Her outburst only fueled the officer's suspicion. After all, why would a victim resist an investigation unless there was something to hide? Not long after, the police held a press conference. The chief, clearly annoyed, told reporters that the entire case had been a hoax. He accused the couple of wasting police resources and planning an elaborate kidnapping scheme for attention. Both Aaron and Denise were formally charged with fraud and public resource misuse. Suddenly, the once respected therapists found themselves branded as notorious scammers. Their jobs were suspended, and their reputations were tarnished. The local community turned against them, even comparing their story to the plot of a recent blockbuster movie. But the story didn't end there. 8 days after the couple's charges were filed, a small-town newspaper received a mysterious email. The sender, claiming to be the real kidnapper, mocked the police for being fooled so easily and vowed to continue targeting others. The email contained 2 photographs, one of a toy gun with a laser pointer taped to it, and another showing the corner of a room with windows sealed by cardboard. These specific details were never made public and were known only to the victims and the investigators handling the case. With years of experience in journalism, the newspaper editor noticed that the email was written with an unusually precise legal tone, different from what you'd expect from an average person or even 2 medical professionals. Yet, the police refused to acknowledge the authenticity of the email, suspecting it to be a distraction crafted by the couple. They argued that since the couple had hired lawyers, it wouldn't be impossible for someone to write the email for them. 3 months passed, and the case of the supposed fake kidnapping and the real fraud remained entangled in legal proceedings. Then, less than 80 miles from where Denise had allegedly been abducted, there was a home invasion and attempted kidnapping. When police arrived at the scene to gather evidence, they discovered something eerily familiar: swimming goggles sealed with duct tape. Due to the high-profile nature of the earlier case, the police initially thought it could be a copycat criminal, using the same method to blindfold the victims. However, after speaking with the victims' families, they were stunned to discover striking similarities between the 2 cases. This time, it was a family of 3, the parents in one room and their 14-year-old daughter in the adjoining bedroom. The father was awakened in the middle of the night by a flashlight beam, just like in the previous case, and saw the same red laser dot. A tall man in a black hood pointed a gun at the father's head and demanded that he tie his wife's hands and feet with zip ties. Every step mirrored the earlier incident, but with one critical difference. The father did not comply. Instead, he fought back fiercely, using a bedside lamp to strike the intruder. Taking advantage of the situation, the mother quickly hid in the bathroom. The father then yelled to his wife to grab a gun from the bathroom, though there was no gun in the house, nor had either of them ever used one. The bluff worked, scaring the intruder, who fled the house. The father chased the man outside, where he saw him drive off in a white car. It was only then that the couple realized their daughter had been tied up in her room, her hands and feet bound, and her eyes covered. It seemed the intruder's plan had been to incapacitate the parents first, then abduct the daughter. Fortunately, the parents' brave actions thwarted what could have been a devastating outcome. Although photos of the family were never released, reports mentioned that the father was of Asian descent. Due to the intruder's hurried escape, the crime scene was not as carefully cleaned as it had been when Denise was kidnapped. The police found DNA from the attacker on the bedside lamp, as well as a suspicious Samsung phone near the door. The phone was registered to a 38-year-old Californian man named Matthew Muller. Additionally, the police managed to recover deleted text messages and photos from the phone, including the $12,000 ransom demand sent to Denise's boyfriend. Using the location data from when the ransom message was sent, the police tracked down a vacation cabin owned by Muller. They immediately went there and found a white car parked outside, matching the description given by the Asian father in the second case. Without hesitation, they entered the property and found Matthew calmly sitting in the living room, hands raised, saying, "You finally found me." He offered no resistance and cooperated fully during his arrest. Inside the vacation cabin, police discovered a room where the windows were sealed with cardboard, perfectly matching the photos from the leaked email and Denise's description. They also found a replica gun, duct-taped swimming goggles, zip ties, and cough syrup mixed with sedatives. In Matthew's car, they uncovered a crucial piece of evidence, a blonde hair strand tangled in one of the zip ties. And whose blonde hair was it? None other than that of Denise. What's more, the data from Matthew's car showed that he had been near Denise's apartment on the night of March 24th and near her parents' home 2 days later, exactly coinciding with the times of her kidnapping and release. All the evidence pointed to the fact that Denise and her boyfriend had been telling the truth the entire time. However, when the police showed Matthew's photo to the couple for identification, they both claimed they had never seen him before and didn't display any hostility toward him. They were completely bewildered as to how they had become involved in this mess. So the big question remained, why did Matthew commit these heinous acts? The key to understanding his motive lay in Matthew's background. Police investigations revealed that Matthew came from a wealthy family. His father owned a large accounting firm in California, ensuring Matthew had been financially secure since birth. Despite his wealth, Matthew didn't squander his fortune. After finishing high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, becoming a mechanic. His superiors praised his intelligence and diligence during his service. After leaving the military, Matthew was accepted into Harvard Law School, graduating with honors and becoming a licensed attorney. This explained why the newspaper editor had recognized the sophisticated language in the extortion letter. In 2012, a female intern at the law firm where Matthew worked accused him of sexual harassment. The case dragged on for over a year before Matthew settled privately, paying the woman a substantial sum. However, during the proceedings, the intern's testimony somehow leaked. She described Matthew as having deviant desires but lacking the physical ability to act on them, requiring tools to harass women. This revelation caused Matthew's reputation to plummet. His wife of 2 years also took advantage of the situation and divorced him. Afterward, Matthew left the firm and didn't renew his law license, effectively ending his legal career. He later tried his hand at sales but was soon fired for poor performance. The shadow of the harassment lawsuit haunted him, derailing his life. Though Matthew could have lived comfortably without working, he blamed the intern for ruining his career. His anger first targeted his ex-wife, but soon extended to all women. He saw the world as unfairly biased toward women, with both the legal system and public opinion siding against men. This sense of injustice fueled his desire for revenge, to prove that assumptions could be wrong. In the past 2 years, there had been over 30 reported home invasions in the San Francisco Bay Area, but nearly all the women who reported the incidents were dismissed as mentally unstable. Only 2 cases were filed, quickly buried among countless others. Matthew's appetite for humiliation grew, and targeting women alone no longer excited him. He found greater pleasure in humiliating men in front of their partners, not just causing harm but ensuring that they were ruined forever. If not for the brave actions of the Asian family who fought back, who knows how far Matthew's twisted plan would have escalated. After Matthew's arrest, his wealthy parents spared no expense in trying to absolve him, hiring top defense attorneys and even a renowned psychologist to argue that Matthew had severe mental health issues and possibly a split personality. But in the face of all these efforts, Matthew made a sudden decision. He chose to plead guilty to all charges. In his mind, he had achieved his goal. He had shattered people's trust in the police, the judicial system, and even women. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison for multiple offenses. As for Denise and her boyfriend, the fraud charges against them were officially dropped 2 days after Matthew's arrest. The city's police department issued a formal apology, and details of the case were finally released, clearing up the confusion. It turned out the entire narrative about a love triangle had been pure speculation by the media. In 2018, following a lengthy civil suit, the couple and the police department reached a settlement. They were awarded $2.5 million in damages for the emotional and reputational harm they had suffered due to the police's mishandling of the case. Fortunately, after enduring so much hardship, the couple married in September 2018. A year later, they welcomed their first daughter, followed by another girl in 2022. Now, the family of 4 enjoys a peaceful life in a small town, having moved past the dark chapter of their lives. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. As the sun began to set on June 7, 2011, the living room of the 25-floor apartment in the University Club Tower in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was filled with long shadows. After a heated argument, Joshua was pushed towards a window. He tried to catch himself, but the glass shattered, and he fell through. People below watched in shock as Joshua's body plummeted from the high floor, landing with a terrible thud on the 8th-floor parking garage. Joshua Hilberling was born on May 30, 1988, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was the son of Gene and Patrick Hilberling and had 5 siblings: Zach, Scott, David, Carrie, and Nikki Ross. Growing up in a large family, Joshua's childhood was lively and joyful, filled with games invented by his siblings. He was especially close to Zach, who was just 13 months younger, and they shared a strong bond, with Zach often emulating Joshua. Patrick, a veteran of the Air Force, instilled values of integrity and commitment in his children. Joshua attended Victoria Christian High School, where he excelled in sports, particularly football. He was also known for his friendly and charming personality, enjoying video games and family time. In 2007, after completing his studies, Joshua followed in his father's footsteps and joined the United States Air Force. In early 2010, he met Amber, whom he believed to be the love of his life. Amber reciprocated his feelings, and their relationship blossomed quickly. Amber was born on October 1, 1991, in Joplin, Missouri. Her family moved to Tulsa 3 months after her birth, where they later welcomed 2 more children, Adam and Ariel. Amber, with her beautiful long blonde hair, attended Skelly Elementary School. She was not only beautiful but also intelligent and dedicated, consistently ranking among the top students. During her school years, she participated in various outdoor activities, excelling in soccer, volleyball, track, and dance. She was also a member of an American nonprofit organization that promotes and supports agricultural education. After her parents' divorce, Amber's mother remarried a well-known local surgeon. He embraced Amber as his own daughter. Amber was a devout churchgoer and a voracious reader and movie enthusiast, often quoting films to the fascination of those around her. She also had a keen interest in history and wrote many eloquent poems. Amber had a passion for fashion, makeup, and shoes. When Joshua and Amber met, she was 18 and living with her mother and stepfather. Their relationship progressed quickly, and when Joshua, then 22, learned he would be stationed in Alaska in 6 months, they decided to marry so she could accompany him. They wed in the summer of 2010 in a beautiful ceremony, with one of Joshua's brothers serving as the best man. Shortly after, the newlyweds moved to Fairbanks, Alaska. Despite their excitement, they soon faced unforeseen challenges. Their youth, inexperience, and the isolation of their new home led to frequent arguments, as Amber herself later recounted. Her husband also developed the habit of breaking her cell phone so that she couldn't communicate when he wasn't home. Although there are versions that suggest she had a fiery temperament, as often happens in relationships, especially in extreme cases, the truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. Despite their tumultuous relationship, they remained in love and soon discovered they were expecting their first child. However, on January 2, 2011, base officials received a report from Amber alleging that her husband had assaulted her. She told the officers that they began arguing after she wanted to order takeout, which he refused, leading to insults. While Amber was preparing dinner, Joshua approached her, throwing a drink and a plate from her hand. He then grabbed her right breast, causing bruising and broken blood vessels. These details were recorded in the military report, and photographs of the injuries were taken to document the case, leading to Joshua's arrest. The incident occurred in the first trimester of Amber's pregnancy, and she ultimately decided not to press charges. 5 months later, things worsened when Joshua was unexpectedly and disgracefully discharged from the Air Force due to misconduct involving drug use, as shown in records. As a result, Joshua and his beautiful wife packed their bags once more and returned to Tulsa. Despite their rocky relationship, Amber and Joshua were excited about their baby's impending arrival. a joy shared by their families. The couple temporarily moved into Amber's mother's home while making permanent housing arrangements and preparing for the birth. However, this arrangement was short-lived. Joshua's issues extended to his in-laws, who accused him of substance abuse and demanded that he leave. Although Amber was welcome to stay, she chose to go with him. Concerned for her daughter's and grandchild's well-being, Rhonda, Amber's mother, generously allowed them to stay in one of her properties, an apartment on the 25th floor of University Club Tower, a unique 32-story cylindrical building. Amber's maternal grandmother also lived in one of the units. The building, constructed in 1966, was the first major U.S. structure designed using computerization for structural calculations, ensuring it was strong enough to withstand wind sway. When the young couple moved in, the facade and glass curtain wall panels were 46 years old, and the building did not meet modern construction standards. Moving there did not bring peace or relief to their marriage. The arguments continued, exacerbated by Joshua's frequent nighttime outings. He would leave Amber alone in the apartment and take the car her mother had lent them, meant for Amber's use in case of emergencies with her advanced pregnancy. Records show numerous text messages from Amber to Joshua, pleading for him to return home and fulfill his family responsibilities, but he repeatedly refused. By this time, their families and friends had taken sides, each blaming the other. Amidst accusations and gossip, there were frequent suggestions that they should separate for their own good. In early June 2011, with Amber 7 months pregnant, the couple seriously considered divorce, making their home environment even more unbearable. The situation escalated to the point where one of them threw a TV out the bedroom window, shattering it. When they informed the building manager about the broken window, they were told they had to pay for the damage. On Tuesday, June 7, 2011, with the divorce papers on a table in their apartment, Joshua decided to skip Amber's biological father's wedding that weekend. Instead, Joshua chose to go with his friends to a music festival in Tennessee. According to Amber, he planned to use and sell drugs at the event. Upset about his imminent absence at such an important family event and his dubious intentions, Amber reacted badly. After a heated exchange, she continued packing laundry to take to her grandmother's house since their apartment lacked a washer and dryer. In a fit of rage, she began pulling her husband's dirty clothes out of the basket. At that moment, the professional hired to repair the broken window knocked on the door. Upon entering, he immediately sensed the tension in the air. When he quoted a repair cost of $150, the couple started arguing again. Joshua considered fixing it himself, but ultimately agreed it was best for the professional to handle it. With his belongings packed, Joshua asked his father to pick him up, but his father said it wasn't possible. Consequently, Joshua turned to his friends for help. One of them, Brandon, agreed to come but didn't realize the urgency of the request. Soon after, the situation between Joshua and Amber escalated into even more violence. Exactly what happened next is a mystery both took to their graves. On the afternoon of Tuesday, June 7, 2011, while they were arguing in the living room, 23-year-old Joshua inexplicably fell against the window, which shattered on impact. Amber watched in horror as her husband plummeted from the 25th floor. The professional working on the other broken window in the bedroom heard the crash and rushed to the living room. Initially, given the heated argument he had overheard, he thought Joshua had jumped intentionally. According to his later testimony, Amber was completely distraught, crying and frantically saying Joshua had fallen and needed help. She then ran out the apartment door. Across the street, Robert, a resident, was smoking a cigarette when he saw Joshua fall and land face down on the 8th floor parking garage, his head against the railing. It took nearly 3 seconds for Joshua to hit the ground, resulting in an instant death. Robert ran towards the apartment complex while the manager tried to contact Armando, the professional fixing the window. Meanwhile, Amber frantically pressed the elevator buttons to get to the first floor, searching desperately for Joshua. When she couldn't find him, she looked toward the 8th-floor parking garage and realized what had happened. She ran to the elevator again, this time accompanied by the building manager, who urged her to remain calm to avoid causing a bigger scene. Upon reaching Joshua's lifeless body, Amber understood the gravity of the situation. Paramedics, firefighters, and authorities arrived, alerted by several neighbors. Amid tears and screams, Amber repeatedly begged them to save him, but it was clear there was nothing they could do. Amber kept saying she hadn't meant for this to happen. Although one of the firefighters heard her mention, it was never her intention for things to escalate so severely. The police escorted Amber to the Tulsa police station as a formality, to ask standard questions and try to piece together the events of that day. Amber requested to wait for her grandmother before going. At that point, the authorities were uncertain about what exactly had happened in the couple's apartment. Unbeknownst to Amber, her life was about to change dramatically, not only because she was now a widow, but in many other aspects. Once at the station, the police placed Amber and her grandmother in a room where they were alone. They were asked to remain calm as someone would be with them shortly. What they didn't realize was that the room was equipped with recording devices. Every word they spoke during that time was captured. Additionally, an on-duty officer observed all their actions in real time. Amid her utter shock, Amber tearfully told her grandmother that while they were arguing in the living room, she went to the bedroom and upon returning she pushed Joshua towards the wall in response to his insults. He stumbled, tried to catch himself, but ultimately fell through the window. At one point, she told her grandmother that Joshua's parents were right when they repeatedly claimed that if they stayed together, she would eventually cause his death. Amber couldn't stop lamenting the fatal outcome she had caused. Her grandmother was aware that Amber's in-laws would relentlessly pursue her, so she urged her to stay strong, especially for her unborn child. Despite following her grandmother's advice to remain silent without legal representation, the police still arrested Amber as a suspect. The next day, after securing a lawyer, her mother paid the bail, and Amber was released. As the investigation continued, Joshua's memorial service was held on the morning of Saturday, June 11, 2011. Instead of flowers, the family requested memorial contributions in Joshua's name. From that point on, each family accused the other spouse of violence. Amber's claim of self-defense against an abusive husband was quickly overshadowed by the aggressive public campaign launched by Joshua's relatives and friends. The media sided with the Hilberlings, portraying Amber as a mentally unstable criminal and Joshua as a gentle man driven to madness by her. Websites appeared where anonymous people called for Amber's execution, and strangers harassed her family. On August 6, 2011, while awaiting a complex and controversial trial, Amber gave birth to her son. Close friends described him as a beautiful blend of his parents. Amber and her lawyers rejected 2 plea deals offered by the district attorney's office. One deal was a 5-year prison sentence plus 15 years of probation, and the other was 7 years in prison with 13 years suspended. Amber later told a major American media outlet that she did not regret her decision, as she was confident in her innocence and willing to take any risk to prove it. These decisions led to her being tried for second-degree murder. When Amber began attending court hearings in fitted jackets, impeccably made up and sporting disheveled blonde hair, The public and press used these details to confirm their preconceived notions about her. Meanwhile, she cherished every moment with her young son, finding peace in watching him grow amidst the chaos surrounding her case, which seemed focused on her family's financial means to evade justice. On the opposite side of her, many detractors, was a page created by those who believed in her innocence. Although fewer, these supporters extensively discussed on social media the records of domestic violence perpetrated by Joshua. They also posted text messages from Amber's phone, supposedly from conversations with her husband the day before his death. On September 19, 2012, Amber filed a lawsuit against University Club Tower, claiming that Joshua's death resulted from the condominium's negligence. The document alleged that Joshua's fatal fall occurred because the window did not meet the glass requirements stipulated by Tulsa's building code. 6 months later, Amber's trial commenced. During her testimony, Amber told the jury that when she entered the living room, Joshua stepped away from the window and walked toward her. It was then, according to her, that he grabbed her shoulders with both hands. Fearing the worst, she pushed him hard against the wall between the chandeliers and the TV. To better explain, Amber drew a diagram of the push, and the court allowed her to stand in the witness box to demonstrate. The deputy district attorney began her cross-examination, making it clear to the jury that they did not need to believe Amber intended to kill her husband to convict her of the charge. They only needed to be certain that her act was extremely dangerous to another person. She added that the incident evidenced a depraved mindset. In this context, the video of Amber's conversation with her grandmother at the police station, where she admitted her guilt, was a key piece of evidence presented by the prosecution, despite the defense's efforts to suppress it. Additionally, the prosecutors called witnesses who claimed to have heard sounds of a struggle in the apartment, including heavy footsteps moving towards the window area. Their hypothesis suggested that Amber, despite her advanced pregnancy, had attacked her nearly 6-foot, 220-pound husband in a fit of rage, pushing him through the glass. Armando testified about what he heard and saw that day, as did the firefighter at the scene, who mentioned that Amber repeatedly said she didn't mean to push her husband out the window. An expert in windows and glass was called as a defense witness. He explained that the window in question was made of annealed glass, which lacked the strength required for residential use. He asserted that if the window had been made of safety glass, Joshua might not have fallen through it, as tempered glass is 4 times more resistant to wind loads and twice as resistant to impacts as regular annealed glass. In his expert opinion, the domestic dispute put the victim in contact with weak, unsafe, and poorly supported glass, compounded by other factors like the building's poor condition and wind pressures pushing the glass and Joshua outward. Despite the defense's considerable efforts, the jury took only 3 hours to find Amber guilty of second-degree murder. On March 18, 2013, the judge sentenced Amber to 25 years in prison for the crime against her husband. Additionally, she was fined $10,000 and ordered to reimburse over $6,000 in funeral expenses paid by Joshua's family. According to Oklahoma law, after 1 year, the judge could suspend part or all of the sentence, potentially granting Amber less time behind bars. Otherwise, she had to serve at least 85% of her sentence, or 21 years, before being eligible for parole. Amber's son, then 6 years old, was legally placed under the care of his grandmother Rhonda and her husband. They regularly visited Amber in prison. A couple of months after the sentencing, a well-known American presenter traveled to the correctional center to interview Amber. The program aired in 2016. During the televised interview, Amber admitted to yelling at her husband, calling him a coward during the argument that led to his fatal fall, but she continued to insist on her innocence. The special, which included interviews with family members, police personnel, and various experts, reignited public interest in the case and the controversial verdict. The passage of time did little to lessen the controversy surrounding the story. The flame was further fanned when the state Supreme Court questioned the tactics used to prosecute Amber. Rhonda blamed the Hilberlings' high profile in Tulsa for creating and fostering certain prejudices against her daughter. Later, rumors of Amber's alleged misconduct while in custody brought her back into sensationalist headlines. The lawsuit against University Club Tower was dismissed in March 2015. Amber died in prison on October 24, 2016, at the age of 26. The coroner's report noted scars on her wrists and forearms and methamphetamine in her blood. According to the coroner, Amber had taken her own life. Later, her parents appeared on television, claiming they believed their daughter had been killed by someone else. The Oklahoma Department of Corrections was sued for failing to take reasonable measures to prevent or address the conditions that led Amber to such a drastic decision while in custody. The lawsuit, filed by her heirs in Oklahoma County District Court, sought $75,000 in compensation. A spokesperson for the prison system stated that the agency does not comment on pending litigation. The outcome of that lawsuit, if any, has not been disclosed. Rhonda, Amber's mother, later remarked that, despite the tragic end that no one in the family desired, her daughter had finally found peace. She also announced that she would ensure her grandson had a fulfilling life. This case highlights the severe issue of domestic violence in the United States. The Hilberlings had reported each other to the authorities multiple times, showing injuries that confirmed their claims. However, they failed to end their toxic relationship, leading to a doubly tragic conclusion. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. In the quiet suburb of Elkins Park, north of Philadelphia, the Rabinowitz household was usually calm and peaceful. But on the evening of April 29, 1997, everything changed. Stephanie Paula Newman, a young lawyer with a bright future, had spent the day with her mother getting ready for her daughter Haley's first birthday. The night seemed normal, with Stephanie, her husband Craig, and their baby enjoying a nice dinner with her parents at a fancy Thai restaurant. After returning home, the family went about their usual routine. Stephanie went upstairs to relax with a bath, while Craig watched a hockey game downstairs. As midnight drew near, the calm was shattered by Craig's panicked 911 call. He said he had found his wife unconscious in the bathtub, appearing to be the victim of a terrible accident. Emergency responders arrived quickly, only to find a scene that would uncover a dark and twisted plot. Stephanie Newman was born on June 3, 1967, in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Stephanie grew up in a Jewish family led by her parents, Louis Herman Newman and his wife Annie. She had two siblings, Philadelphia is known for its significant historical, cultural, and artistic contributions, a quieter life away from the city's hustle and bustle. Stephanie was raised in Elkins Park, a suburb north of Philadelphia, where she quickly showed herself to be both beautiful and intelligent. At a young age, she began studying the Torah, the compilation of books that contain Jewish law and heritage, and she performed public readings, which require very specific intonations. Stephanie was active, extroverted, and sociable, never one to stay still, according to those close to her. At 16, she started working as a counselor at a girls' summer camp during her summer break. It was there she met Craig Rabinowitz, who worked at a nearby boys' camp. Craig, born on September 28, 1963, was 4 years older than Stephanie. Little is known about his early life, except that he was the son of an executive of a prominent clothing manufacturer. Craig frequently visited Stephanie's camp due to his responsibilities, and they started talking. Eventually, he asked her out, and although she was initially hesitant, something changed after their second date. From then on, the couple became inseparable, maintaining their relationship for 7 years. Stephanie's romance did not affect her academic performance. She was diligent in her studies, graduating from high school with a National Merit Scholarship. She went on to earn a degree from Bryn Mawr College, a private women's liberal arts college. After graduating, she enrolled at Temple University to study law. Craig finished high school as an average student, excelling in sports like ice hockey and baseball. He also attended Temple University but dropped out after his first semester. After their long courtship, Stephanie and Craig married in June 1990. With the help of Stephanie's parents, they moved into an apartment. Stephanie's new role as a wife did not hinder her academic pursuits, and she graduated from law school in 1992 with excellent grades. Around the same time, Craig and a friend started a company called C&C Vending, which imported latex gloves for medical use from Malaysia. The company made a few sales before dissolving, but Craig continued in the same business, registering a new company called C&C Supplies. He explained to his in-laws and friends that he would import containers of gloves from Malaysia to sell wholesale, estimating a 33% profit margin. To maximize profits, he needed $88,000 to import 4 containers. The figures he presented were impressive, and he easily convinced Stephanie's parents and one of her brothers to invest in the business, as well as some of his friends. While Craig seemed headed for success, Stephanie was also making strides. After graduating, she took the bar exam, a challenging test for law graduates to practice in the United States. Stephanie passed on her first attempt, and combined with her excellent grades, this did not go unnoticed. She quickly received an attractive job offer from a prestigious law firm with a salary she couldn't refuse. Stephanie had clear dreams and aimed to own a home in a good neighborhood. After 4 years of marriage, the couple moved in with her parents to save money for a down payment on their first house. This dream came true when they moved into a cozy 2-story home in Marion, on Philadelphia's Main Line. This upper-middle-class neighborhood was home to professionals, bankers, executives, and entrepreneurs, many of whom were part of the local Jewish community. With a new life goal achieved, Stephanie's dreams were nearly complete, needing only a child to crown them. It wasn't long before this wish came true with the arrival of a healthy and beautiful baby girl named Haley Sarah Rabinowitz. To everyone, they seemed like the perfect family. Stephanie, a promising lawyer with a rising career, Craig, a businessman owning an import company, and their lovely daughter completing the picture. Neighbors had no complaints, often seeing Craig strolling around with Haley in her stroller. The perfect life, however, was short-lived. As we often see, perfect lives rarely exist, and what appeared to be Stephanie's dream fulfillment soon came to an end. On Tuesday, April 29, 1997, Stephanie and her mother went out in the morning to shop for Haley's first birthday preparations. That evening, Craig, Stephanie, and the baby had dinner at a luxurious Thai restaurant with Stephanie's parents, Lua and Annie. After a delightful meal, they all returned home, with some accounts suggesting everyone went to Craig's house. Upon arrival, Craig mentioned he had too much coffee and felt jittery, so he decided to take Haley for a walk in her stroller. When he returned, his in-laws had already left. After putting Haley to bed, Stephanie and Craig had a beer in the living room before Stephanie went upstairs to take a bath. Meanwhile, Craig stayed downstairs watching a hockey game featuring the local team, the Flyers. Around midnight on April 29, 1997, Craig made a frantic 911 call, reporting an accident. He claimed his wife had fallen in the bathtub, and he found her unconscious and couldn't revive her. Minutes later, the first police officers arrived at the Rabinowitz house, finding the door open and announcing their presence as they entered. They heard Craig's shouts from upstairs and found him holding Stephanie's head above water while her body was submerged in the bathtub. The officers helped lift Stephanie from the tub and attempted resuscitation, trying to restore her consciousness. The commotion woke Haley, who began to cry, and the police told Craig to attend to her. Craig soon returned with Haley in his arms as the paramedics arrived to take over. Stephanie was still unconscious, her body cold and blue. The police informed Craig he needed to come with them, but he was unsure what to do with the baby. At that moment, neighbors, noticing the police activity, offered to stay with Haley. An officer questioned Craig about what happened, and he explained that after dinner with his in-laws, he had a drink with his wife, who then went for a bath to relax since she had trouble sleeping. He stayed watching the hockey game but heard a thud from the bathroom that sounded like a shampoo bottle falling. Not concerned at first, as this often happened to Stephanie, he eventually went to check after she didn't return for over half an hour. He found her unconscious and fully submerged in the water, tried to revive her, and when he couldn't, called 911. He opened the front door for the responders and held her head above water as he couldn't lift her from the tub. Craig's clothes were wet, so the officer advised him to change. Meanwhile, the officer noticed the tub draining, likely dislodged when they moved Stephanie's body. He replaced the plug, aware the scene needed preservation for any potential investigation. The officer also recalled the bathroom floor was completely dry, with no water outside the tub, which stuck in his mind. After changing clothes, Craig was taken to the hospital where Stephanie had been transported. He was informed that despite their efforts, Stephanie was declared dead at 1:29 a.m. Overwhelmed, Craig held his head, repeatedly saying he couldn't believe it and expressed he couldn't go through such loss again, referencing his father's death from cancer 3 years earlier. Craig then faced the daunting task of notifying family and friends about the tragic accident. When Stephanie's parents arrived at the hospital and confirmed her death, Annie collapsed in her husband's arms. They soon began asking when Stephanie's body would be released, as Jewish tradition requires burial as soon as possible, preferably within 24 hours. However, they faced a significant problem. The certifying doctor deemed an autopsy necessary, finding it unusual for a healthy 29-year-old woman to die from a bathtub fall without any visible injuries. This not only delayed the burial but also conflicted with their religious customs, which prohibit desecration of the deceased's body. Additionally, this delayed the period known as Shiva, the 7-day mourning period observed by family members who stay at home, refrain from any form of entertainment, and even cover mirrors to show they are not concerned with their physical appearance. However, the coroner's stance was firm and unyielding, forcing the family to accept it. The autopsy took place in the morning, conducted by the county's deputy medical examiner. By the time the doctor examined Stephanie's body, 12 hours had passed since the emergency was reported. At that time, the situation had changed considerably. The experienced coroner first noticed petechial hemorrhages, small red spots that appear when tiny blood vessels bleed internally. These can be caused by certain illnesses, prolonged effort, medication, or criminal actions like asphyxiation. In Stephanie's case, petechiae were present around her eyes, and that wasn't all her body revealed. As time passed, deep bruises became visible on both sides of her neck and under her jaw. Additionally, she had bruises on her arms and legs, particularly around her knees and elbows. These injuries were difficult to explain as the result of a simple fall in the bathtub. Moreover, the stomach contents examination showed undigested food, suggesting that death occurred around 9:30 p.m., more than 2 hours before Craig called emergency services. At this point, the only suspect for any potential wrongdoing against Stephanie was her husband, as he had assured the police that only he, his wife, and their baby were home, with all doors and windows securely locked. Another detail noted by the first responding officer was that Stephanie was in the bathtub wearing all her jewelry, which is unusual for someone taking a bath. When she was removed from the tub, she was still wearing her earrings, 2 gold bracelets, one with stones, her wedding ring, and even a gold watch. This, along with the dry bathroom floor, didn't match Craig's story about his supposed efforts to lift her from the tub. The authorities quickly launched an investigation, re-inspecting the Rabinowitz residence and confirming nothing was stolen, and there were no signs of forced entry. During this search, they found a bottle of the medication, which contains zolpidem, used for treating sleep problems. Craig stated that both he and his wife had been prescribed this medication due to their sleeping issues. Once the post-mortem studies were completed, Stephanie's body was released to her family for burial, which took place at Mount Lebanon Cemetery. While the family was still grappling with their loss, another shocking event occurred. Just hours after the funeral, Craig was arrested as a suspect in his wife's death. In the following months, Stephanie's parents offered $75,000 for Craig's bail, but some sources claim the bail was set at $5 million. The case took another twist when the police received an anonymous tip suggesting they look into Delilah's Den, a luxurious local gentlemen's club, for information on Craig. Following this lead, the investigators researched the Rabinowitz residence, finding a hidden space in a closet ceiling with a movable panel. Inside, they discovered several men's magazines, a bag full of receipts, and what appeared to be a handwritten ledger. To make sense of the documents, the investigators called in a certified public accountant to organize and interpret the vast amount of financial data. While these studies were ongoing, detectives pursued the anonymous tip at Delilah's Den. There, they learned that Craig was a well-known regular, frequenting not only the general services but also the exclusive champagne room where dancers performed personalized sessions. It became evident that Craig had a particular affinity for an exotic dancer named Summer, whose real name was Shannon Reinert, a 24-year-old who lived with her 2 children. Shannon was located and questioned, confirming Craig was a frequent client who bought her gifts, including jewelry and furniture for her home. She admitted they had met outside the club but insisted their relationship was purely platonic, involving companionship rather than intimacy. Shannon revealed that Craig had confided in her about marital problems, saying he cared for Stephanie but no longer loved her, adding that leaving her would bankrupt him. Additionally, it was discovered that on the night of Stephanie's death, Craig had called Shannon to inform her of his wife's passing, a call that deeply saddened the dancer. But these discoveries paled in comparison to the revelations of the public accountant who examined the papers found at the Rabinowitz house. According to bank and credit card records, in the 9 months before the incident, Craig had spent a staggering $156,000 at the Gentlemen's Club. From January to April 1997 alone, he incurred $29,000 in charges at Delilah's Den, with an average of 3 visits per week, spending over $2,000 each week. Craig's gifts to Shannon included not only furniture for her living room, dining room, and nursery worth about $8,500, but also expensive presents like a Tiffany's pearl necklace costing over $1,900, which he did not give to his wife on Valentine's Day. Additionally, Craig had purchased 2 memberships to an exclusive sports club for himself and Shannon, each costing $365, plus $136 monthly for laundry services, shoe polishing, and lockers in the VIP section. He also spent a small fortune on fine clothing for his favorite dancer. Contrary to Shannon's claim that there was no intimate relationship, Craig's bank records showed frequent stays at 5-star hotels, averaging $500 per night, always registering with Shannon and using the rooms for only a few hours. Moreover, with all the money Craig was squandering, one would assume his latex glove import business was thriving. But investigations revealed that the company had conducted transactions between 1990 and 1992, but no activity was recorded thereafter. No contracts, no purchases, no sales. In short, the business didn't exist. So where did all the money come from? It turned out Craig had been running a Ponzi scheme, named after Charles Ponzi, who famously carried out such a plan in the 1920s in the United States until it was discovered. This pyramid scheme involves promising investors good returns from legitimate economic activities, but these returns are paid from the funds of new investors. Craig had drawn in Stephanie's family, friends, and others. Initially, things went well because Stephanie earned a good salary. However, after giving birth, she wanted to spend time with the baby and arranged with her law firm to halve her workload, resulting in a proportional decrease in income, amounting to only $33,000 annually at the time of the incident, insufficient to sustain the couple's lifestyle. This also made Craig's lavish tastes and financial maneuvers unsustainable. He was aware of the high probability of his schemes being exposed. In a final move, following Haley's birth, Craig took out 2 insurance policies, one for Stephanie worth over $1.5 million and another for himself worth $1.6 million. These policies were in addition to Stephanie's coverage from her law firm, which insured her for $500,000 and her husband for $150,000. According to the accountant's analysis, the calculations were simple, written in Craig's handwriting. In the event of Stephanie's death, Craig would receive over $2 million. This amount would allow him to settle about $700,000 in debts to his investors and keep around $1.5 million. He planned to retain $400,000 and place $1 million in a bank account whose interest would yield over $60,000 annually, allowing him to live comfortably. Shortly after his wife's death, Craig pawned several of her jewelry pieces, including her wedding ring, obtaining $2,200. Additionally, it was reported that he pawned jewelry inherited by Stephanie from her great-grandmother shortly after her death. Moreover, the papers stored by Craig showed that the couple had bought their house 2 years earlier for $230,000 but had since taken out 2 mortgages totaling $300,500, along with some loans from friends. In the second half of 1997, a preliminary hearing was held to determine if there was enough evidence to prosecute Craig for his wife's death. The case was presented by the first assistant district attorney, who explained the Ponzi scheme and how, at the time of the incident, Craig knew his lies were unsustainable. According to the prosecution, one theory was that Stephanie was sedated with a triple dose of Ambien, a medication prescribed only to Craig. Based on bruises found on Stephanie's right side, one hypothesis was that she died elsewhere in the house and was dragged up the stairs to be placed in the bathtub. Another possibility was that, after administering an excessive dose of the sleep medication, Craig carried her to the bathroom to drown her in the tub once she fell asleep. He undressed the body, forgetting to remove the jewelry, and placed her in the water. Possibly, the contact with the water woke Stephanie, causing her to struggle, prompting her husband to strangle her, a process that likely took about 4.5 minutes. During the struggle, she likely injured her elbows and knees against the sides of the tub. The prosecutor revealed that a book about mortuary topics was found on Craig's nightstand, which stated that only 13% of deaths are subject to autopsy. This led him to believe that, coupled with religious considerations, the odds were in his favor, prompting him to take a calculated risk, not anticipating an unyielding coroner. It was also discovered that Craig planned to flee after his wife's funeral, as a suitcase with thousands of dollars in cash was found in the trunk of his car. Court documents revealed that years earlier, Craig had been detained during an investigation into a prostitution ring in Philadelphia, but received immunity in exchange for his testimony in a 1993 trial, already married to Stephanie. Meanwhile, Craig's defense tried to bring up a supposed man who had knocked on a neighbor's door asking for directions, but the police confirmed that Craig was the only man at the Rabinowitz house, something he had himself affirmed, and there were no signs of forced entry. The calculations in Craig's handwritten ledger about what he would receive upon his wife's death and how he would spend it left no doubt that the act was premeditated. The revelations during this process left Stephanie's family and friends in shock. The attorney representing Stephanie's parents, Louis and Annie, read a statement saying they were overwhelmed by the information uncovered. They believed they knew Craig, but it was clear they had been deceived, just like everyone else he had spoken to. Friends and family thought he was a wonderful husband and father. They had even helped with nearly $100,000 for his so-called import business. The prosecution maintained that Craig's situation had reached a breaking point. His credit cards were maxed out, the house was over-mortgaged, and friends and family expected returns from his non-existent business. Admitting the truth would mean his life was destroyed. Instead, ending his wife's life would allow him to clear his debts and fulfill his fantasy with Summer. Later, Craig's defense attempted to have the fraud and murder charges tried separately, but this was not accepted. The trial was set to begin on October 30th, 1997. When the trial date arrived, unfortunately, Louis, Stephanie's father, had passed away a month earlier and could not be present. On the first day of the hearing, everything changed. Craig pleaded guilty to killing his wife to obtain the insurance money. Shaking and sobbing, he claimed he decided to confess after a dream where his wife, father, and father-in-law approached him, placing their hands on his shoulders, telling him it was time to do the right thing. He added that he couldn't subject his family and his 17-month-old daughter to such a painful process. Before finishing his statement, Craig admitted that his life had become a sham, a counterfeit, and a fraud, and the hole he was digging grew deeper and deeper. What was right became wrong and vice versa. He added that his life was on a slippery, steep path, and he had no excuses to offer. Following his statement, the judge sentenced Craig Rabinowitz, 34, to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder of his wife, Stephanie Rabinowitz. According to his prison records, last updated on May 15, 2024, Craig remains incarcerated at the State Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania. In his mugshot taken in October 2022, at 58 years old and with a shaved head, he no longer looked as glamorous as in 1997. He is now 60 years old. Further details emerged during the investigations, such as the couple's return to Louis and Annie's home supposedly to save money for their dream house. In reality, they had been evicted from their apartment and were being sued for $6,000 plus legal fees, a debt Stephanie's parents eventually paid. Beyond the financial details lies the reality of Haley Sarah, who grew up with a father in prison and a deceased mother. She turned 1 the day her mother was buried and had to adjust to a new environment, new faces, and arms different from her mother's warm and loving embrace. Stephanie's maternal grandparents took care of Haley, and after her husband's death, Annie received family support to help shoulder the responsibility. Financial provisions were made for Haley's future. The funeral announcement requested contributions to an account in her name. Stephanie's law firm also established a trust fund for her. The house where the tragedy occurred, which became a site of curiosity for journalists and locals, sold easily in just 4 weeks for $225,000, only $5,000 less than they paid in 1995, but about $25,000 below market value due to its dark past. The sale proceeds were used entirely to pay off the mortgages on the property. In a twist of justice, Stephanie's life insurance money, which Craig had planned to use to solve his problems, was placed in a trust for Haley's future. A year after the incident, Philadelphia Weekly interviewed Craig in prison. He claimed Stephanie made him feel controlled and emasculated, describing her as overly orderly and rule-bound, while he preferred going with the flow, suggesting Stephanie was practically to blame for her own death. He also stated that if released, the first thing he would do is find Shannon. However, it seemed Shannon did not share his passion, as he reportedly wrote to her several times without receiving a response. Despite everything, it is clear that Stephanie was a wonderful, intelligent young woman who dreamed of marrying a good partner, having a home and raising a baby. Yet Craig's selfishness, ambition, and lust turned these dreams into a nightmare, not just for Stephanie's loved ones, but also for their own daughter. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was October 7, 1992, a seemingly ordinary Wednesday evening that would soon turn into a nightmare for one family. 7-year-old Nikki Allen, with her bright eyes and innocent smile, had decided to make the short journey home from her grandfather's apartment, just a floor below her own. She knew the path well. It was a journey she had made countless times. As the clock struck 8:30 p.m., Nikki's small footsteps echoed through the dimly lit corridors of the building. Little did anyone know, these would be the last moments of her life as she made her way through the familiar route. Nikki Allen was born in England during the 1980s, one of 4 daughters to Sharon Henderson. They lived in a low-income housing estate in the city of Sunderland, located in Tyne and Wear, in the northeastern part of England. At 7 years old, Nikki spent her days with her 3 sisters, Stacy, 8, Sarah, 3, and Niamh, 2. Sharon, despite being a loving mother, faced a series of unfortunate relationships. The father of Stacy and Nikki abandoned them, and her subsequent partner also left, failing to take responsibility for Sarah and Niamh. Sharon had to work hard to provide for her children as none of the fathers contributed to their upbringing. Fortunately, her father, who lived in the same building, was a supportive and loving grandfather. He helped Sharon with the girls whenever he could. Despite the challenges of single motherhood, Sharon ensured her daughters never lacked anything essential. Though their budget was tight, the love and dedication Sharon showed made their home a place of joy and warmth. The family cherished weekends and holidays like Christmas and Carnival, often taking outings in the eastern parts of the city. Nikki, like most children, was oblivious to their financial struggles, radiating happiness. Described as a lively and cheerful child with adventurous spirit, her brownish-red hair contrasted beautifully with her fair skin, complemented by her vibrant brown eyes and an infectious smile that made her stand out. On the evening of Wednesday, October 7th, 1992, Nikki and her sisters were being looked after by their grandfather. Around 8:30 p.m., Nikki decided to go home, which was just a floor below in the same building. It was common for one of the older girls to head home first. Nikki knew the short route well, having traversed it many times without issue. That night, Sharon returned home to find Nikki missing. Initially, this didn't raise alarm as her other daughters, Stacy, Sarah, and Niamh, had not arrived either. But when they returned without Nikki, Sharon called her father, who confirmed Nikki had left his apartment 10 minutes before her sisters. The building was a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other, and mutual support was a daily practice. Nikki was well-liked for her endearing nature. In growing worry, Sharon began knocking on neighbors' doors, asking if anyone had seen her daughter and calling everyone she knew to find Nikki. When no one could provide any information, Sharon's fear turned to dread. Nikki was missing. The community organized search parties to scour every corner of the building and its surroundings. The search went on through the night and into the early hours of the morning. Sharon's anxiety escalated into panic and desperation. As dawn broke on Thursday, October 8th, with no sign of Nikki, the family contacted the authorities. The police arrived and began a thorough search, questioning residents, Sharon, the grandfather, and anyone who might know something. A discovery that froze everyone's blood was made. Nikki's small shoes were found discarded at the entrance of an abandoned building not far from her home. With heavy hearts, neighbors and police entered the building, their dread growing with each step. The tension was palpable, likened to the calm before a storm. Inside, they found a dark, sticky stain on the floor, resembling dried blood. In the middle of it lay Nikki's lifeless body, a heartbreaking end to the frantic search. It was clear at first glance that Nikki had suffered a brutal attack. She sustained multiple wounds from a sharp weapon, and her head had been struck with a brick. The scene was heartbreaking. Nikki's fragile body lay in a pool of blood, utterly alone in an abandoned building. This moment marked the beginning of a relentless fight for justice for Nikki, a fight that she rightfully deserved. News of this horrific incident spread rapidly, shocking the entire city of Sunderland. The community was not only devastated because it involved a young, innocent child, but also because of the sheer brutality of the crime. The support for the family was overwhelming. Hundreds gathered to support Sharon and her family at the painful funeral. The media quickly picked up the story, pushing for updates on the investigation, which in turn put immense pressure on the authorities to solve the case. The police started the investigation. The entire intelligence apparatus was mobilized to find clues and testimonies that could shed light on the perpetrator. A composite sketch was created and compared with various suspects. However, as months passed, no solid leads emerged and no suspects were identified. Despite the pain and anguish, Sharon did not give up. Throughout 1992, she remained resilient, giving interviews and urging the authorities to produce results. The detectives assured Sharon of their unwavering support and the commitment of the entire Sunderland police force to find the culprit and bring them to justice. But beyond the declarations and good intentions, the path to truth was fraught with obstacles and dead ends. Yet, Sharon clung to the hope that justice would eventually be served for the tragic loss of her beloved daughter. In late 1993, the investigation focused on George Herron, a young man who lived near Nikki's home. The evidence found at his residence was troubling. A knife matching the pattern of Nikki's wounds was discovered, along with bloodstains on his shoes and clothes. George's sister provided crucial information, noting that on the night Nikki disappeared, George had spent an unusually long time in the bathroom. Although George initially denied leaving that night, 4 witnesses claimed to have seen him at nearby pubs buying Nikki's favorite chips. The police believe George used the snacks to lure Nikki to the abandoned building where she was killed. George insisted he was innocent, but he was detained as a suspect. After 3 days of intense interrogation, George confessed to Nikki's murder. This confession, though initially accepted, was later invalidated as it was obtained through coercion. All the evidence against him was circumstantial, but the police were confident they would secure a conviction. News of the arrest of the confessed killer was met with some relief, and the media quickly broadcast the development. Sharon felt a burden lifted, having spent an entire year desperately searching for her daughter's attacker, whom she described as a monster. The media detailed every aspect of the case against George, including his full name, residence, and image. However, the case against George fell apart when the court ruled his recorded confession inadmissible, citing it was obtained through police intimidation. After a brief trial, it was concluded that there was no evidence proving George's involvement in the crime, and he was declared innocent of Nikki's murder. For his protection, following public scrutiny, George was granted a new identity and relocated away from Sunderland to start anew. Nevertheless, Sharon believed in the police's version and remained convinced that George was responsible for her family's tragedy. Determined to seek justice, Sharon filed a civil suit against George in 1994, accusing him of wrongful death. The court ruled in Sharon's favor, ordering George to pay over £7,000, a sum she never received as George could not be located. Despite the setback, the police continued to investigate, gathering reports and following leads, but the case grew cold over time. 20 years after Nikki's tragic death, the case remained open but stagnant. Unexpectedly, a breakthrough emerged, offering new hope for justice for Nikki and her anguished family. In February 2014, serial offender Stephen Greaves' son, already incarcerated, became a suspect. His modus operandi in previous crimes closely matched Nikki's case. Stephen had a history of cooperating with authorities, confessing to unsolved crimes and providing valuable information on similar cases, making him a crucial resource for the investigators. However, this time, Stephen took a completely different approach. He declared his innocence and refused to cooperate with any aspect of the investigation. After decades of dead ends and false leads, hopes were pinned on the significant advancements in forensic technology of that era. Investigators conducted blood analyses to find evidence linking Stephen to Nikki's murder, but the results ultimately excluded him as a suspect. Once again, they were back to square one and had to start from scratch. This was disappointing news for the investigators and for Sharon, Nikki's mother, who had placed her hopes on this new lead. Despite the setback, Sharon didn't give in to despair. Committed to keeping her daughter's case in the public eye, she continued to give interviews to the media. Through her courageous persistence, she hoped to keep Nikki's memory alive and to maintain pressure on the authorities to fulfill their duty of ensuring justice for her little girl. As the 25th anniversary of Nikki's murder approached, Sharon made a public revelation that was both raw and heartbreaking. She admitted that she had not been a good mother to Stacy, Sarah, and Niam. She acknowledged that her other 3 daughters had grown up feeling neglected, accustomed to seeing their mother constantly dealing with the media and police, dedicating all her time and effort to keeping Nikki's case in the spotlight. Sharon's candid admission had a profound impact on the British public and sparked a wide-ranging debate about the struggles faced by those who suffer the tragic loss of a loved one and how it can affect other important areas of their lives. Moved by Sharon's public self-reproach and suffering, the community once again rallied around Nikki's case, demanding answers about the current state of the investigation and what was being done to find the culprit. The pressure on the authorities intensified, and hopes for justice for Nikki were reignited. The media also got involved, emphasizing that the quest for truth and justice for Nikki was not just a legal battle, but also an emotional and exhausting ordeal for Sharon and her family. In May 2016, Sharon received a startling call from a woman claiming to have new information about Nikki's murder. This person, who had been 12 years old at the time of Nikki's disappearance and had been babysitting near the crime scene, shared her memories and possible leads with the police. In September of the same year, Sharon launched an online petition demanding a new, thorough investigation into Nikki's case. The petition quickly gained support, garnering hundreds of signatures in less than 24 hours, reflecting the public's interest in finding answers and justice for Nikki. However, the police and judicial system seemed to move at a frustratingly slow pace. Throughout 2017, Sharon continued to press the authorities. They assured her that they were still working on the case, even if no public updates were given. Unbeknownst to many, specialists were conducting DNA tests on hundreds of men who had lived in the area at the time of the crime. This effort eventually led to a valuable lead. In October 2017, around the 25th anniversary of Nikki's death, the police announced a significant forensic breakthrough that could potentially resolve the case. They had successfully obtained a DNA sample from an unknown male, offering new hope. On April 17, 2018, the police arrested David Thomas Boyd, a 54-year-old man previously convicted of offenses against children, as a suspect in Nikki's murder. Based on new evidence gathered during 2016 and 2017, it was discovered that David had been a former neighbor of Nikki's grandfather, making him a potential suspect who fit the perpetrator's profile. The police raided a house where David lived and detained him. The authorities conducted a new round of interrogations, meticulously examining alibis and available evidence. However, lacking solid evidence directly linking him to Nikki's murder, they had to release him pending further investigation. Despite being a promising lead, the lack of conclusive evidence prevented David from being formally charged at that time. The case remained unsolved, and the search for the true culprit continued. The most devastating blow for Sharon came in 2019. The detective who had been assigned to the case from the beginning and had since become Chief Inspector of Sunderland Police was unexpectedly appointed as the new Chief of Police in Cleveland. This personnel change raised concerns about the proper continuity of the investigation, as it was unprecedented for a police chief from one city to simultaneously manage an ongoing case in another city. For Sharon, this news was a crushing setback, and she expressed her dismay publicly. As if that weren't enough, the detective was hired as part of a sensationalist television program that sought to track fugitives involved in crimes against celebrities. The scandal caused a national uproar, especially at a time when the reputation of the English police was under scrutiny due to various unfortunate events involving some law enforcement officers. Nevertheless, both the detective and the Sunderland Police Department issued a statement assuring that the investigation had not been halted and that they remained committed to finding Nicky's killer. Despite the obstacles and challenges, Sharon and the authorities' determination to achieve justice for Nicky remained unshaken. In April 2019, David was detained and interrogated once more about Nicky's case. However, the pandemic caused further delays, imposing limitations on judicial processes. Nonetheless, the police dedicated themselves to individually testing DNA samples from 839 men across the country related to the case or investigation, aiming to eliminate them as suspects. During 2020 and 2021, Sharon received new reports about potential leads and revelations from new witnesses who claimed to have unheard-of information about the case. These new clues added to the previous efforts to uncover the truth that had remained elusive for the police, especially for Sharon, who was approaching 30 years of fighting for justice for her daughter. In January 2022, the police officially referred the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, thus transferring responsibility from Sunderland police detectives to a new administrative direction, placing the case in a bureaucratic limbo, much to Sharon's dismay. Fortunately, Sharon's fears were unfounded. In May 2022, there was a significant breakthrough when David was formally charged with Nicky's murder. He appeared before the court, pleaded not guilty, but was remanded in custody. On April 20, 2023, the trial began. During the hearings, evidence against David was presented, including an animated video showing how he had dragged and disposed of Nicky's body. The prosecutor explicitly assured the jury that David was the true perpetrator of the fatal assault on Nicky. The trial continued with crucial testimonies and details about how David had lured Nicky to the site and committed the horrific acts. The prosecution presented evidence of David's DNA found on Nicky's clothing, which further strengthened the case against him. The prosecution alleged that David had taken Nicky to a wasteland by the River Wear, where he struck her on the head. They added that he had forced Nicky through an opening in a boarded-up window of the abandoned building, where he attacked her until she died. The autopsy revealed that Nicky had suffered a blunt force trauma to the head, likely rendering her unconscious before receiving the fatal stab wounds. The trial also revealed that David Boyd had been convicted in March 2000 for indecent assault on a girl in a Stockton park on April 8, 1999. He had also been convicted of public order offenses in 1986 when he approached 4 children and grabbed a 10-year-old girl. Another detail revealed during the trial was that David knew the layout of the abandoned building where Nicky was found and had used the same window days earlier when he took a boy there, supposedly to look for pigeons. The defense argued that the evidence was merely innocent coincidences and that there was no direct proof of David's guilt. David concocted a story to explain the presence of his DNA on Nicky's clothing. He claimed he had spat from his balcony on the night of the incident, and Nicky might have touched a railing where his saliva landed, then wiped her hands on her clothes, transferring the DNA. The judge explained to the jury that the case was based on circumstantial evidence, but the evidence presented so far strongly pointed to David's guilt. On May 12, 2023, after just 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found David guilty of Nikki Allen's murder. The verdict was a huge relief for Sharon and a victory for justice after decades of relentless pursuit. The man who ended Nikki's life and dreams and caused immense pain to her family would finally face justice for his cruel actions. On a day that seemed unreachable for Sharon, she finally got the results she had long awaited after 31 long years. When the court delivered the verdict declaring the man guilty, the news was met with a mix of relief and emotion, and the courtroom erupted in applause. Outside the court, under torrential rain, Nikki's family shared tears, hugs, and kisses. Despite the celebrations, there was still discontent among the family regarding the way the police investigation was conducted. Despite the historic verdict, Sharon expressed her frustration over the long wait and the fact that the man had lived freely for years without deserving it. Nikki's older sister, Stacy, recalled seeing David several times near the buildings where they lived during their childhood. She mentioned that all the children distrusted him and described him as a very creepy figure. At the time of her statements, Stacy was 39 years old and shared the profound impact finding her sister's body had on the community, as well as the immense damage to their family. As candid as her mother about the devastating effects of losing Nikki, Stacy confessed to having behavioral problems and resorted to substance abuse and rave parties to escape the pain. However, she eventually found a path to recovery and redemption. She now works helping people with substance and alcohol dependencies overcome their struggles and is also a boxing coach. The long-awaited news came on May 23, 2023. David was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 29 years before he could be eligible for parole, meaning he would only be able to apply for release on August 16, 2049. Following the verdict, the police issued an apology to 56-year-old Sharon for the failures in the original investigation and celebrated that Nikki's case was finally closed. After the news broke, Sharon spoke to BBC News about the 31 years of waiting for Nikki to receive justice. When asked about the police's apology, she said she did not accept it. She pointed out that she had repeatedly asked if they were considering David as a suspect but was never listened to. She felt abandoned by the police all those years and stated that it took a forensic DNA breakthrough to finally capture David, who should have been on the police's radar from the beginning. Adding to her indignation was the fact that she learned about the conviction through the news. In response, the police stated that they had tried multiple times to contact Sharon but could not reach her until after the media interviews. They assured that she would be given the opportunity to speak with a senior police official. Sharon responded that she preferred actions over words and urged the police to investigate other individuals she believed might be implicated in the crime. The official response to Sharon's new suspicions came swiftly. The investigator who had led the investigation since 1992 asserted that the police were confident David acted alone. She also expressed a desire to share information with Sharon to put her mind at ease. Indeed, the conviction of the guilty party provided some relief and closure to Nikki's family. However, Sharon said that a wound remained open in her heart. Nikki's story teaches us the importance of persevering until the truth is found. It also highlights the need to ensure that families who lose a loved one to violent crime receive adequate support throughout the often devastating process of seeking justice. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
Emergency. 74. This whole house exploded. Were there people inside the house? Yes, there are. They're probably dead.
These are not images of an ordinary fire. They depict the scene of a horrific crime that took place in 2001, orchestrated by a man labeled as a family annihilator. This event revealed the dual nature of Robert Fisher, a man who appeared to be a devoted father and husband to the community, but meticulously planned each step of his atrocious act. He subsequently became one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. In this video, we delve into every detail of the story that shocked the residents of Arizona and remains one of the most profound unsolved mysteries in the history of U.S. criminal cases. Robert William Fisher was born on April 13, 1961, in Brooklyn, New York. His father, William Fisher, worked as a banker, while his mother, Jan Howell, was a homemaker. Robert was the eldest of 3 siblings, having 2 younger sisters with whom he shared a close bond, particularly with his youngest sister, with whom he was like best friends. In 1976, Robert faced a significant upheaval in his family when his parents divorced. His mother cited his father's controlling behavior as the primary reason for their separation. Unlike his sisters, Robert was deeply affected by the divorce. As the eldest, he had spent the most time with both parents together, making the split especially hard for him to understand and cope with. Fisher enlisted in the United States Navy and attempted to become part of the SEALs but was not successful. He was an avid outdoorsman, hunter, and fisherman. Eventually, in 1987, he met Mary Cooper, who would become the love of his life. They got married and Robert began working various jobs, although he did not have a specific career path. At one point, he worked as a firefighter but had to quit due to a back injury. He later trained in other fields, including surgical catheters, and ultimately became a respiratory therapist. After marrying Mary, they settled in Scottsdale, Arizona, buying a house for $80,000 to start their family. Mary Cooper was a devoted homemaker and deeply religious, sharing her faith with Robert. Both were raised in Christian households and were active members of their church community. In 1991, their first daughter, Brittany, was born, followed by their son, Bobby. The Fishers were a close-knit family, raising their children with strong Christian values. Mary was known to be extremely loving and dedicated to her children, who were bright and excelled in school and sports. Brittany, in particular, stood out for her academic achievements and involvement in activities like gymnastics and soccer. But Robert was described as a cruel and distant control freak toward his family. He and his wife often argued about sex and money, with Mary taking a job she referred to as a security fund to her friends. Fisher once turned a garden hose on Mary for speaking out of turn. He was embarrassed that his son Bobby didn't enjoy hunting or fishing, and once tried to teach him and his daughter Brittany to swim by throwing them off a boat. Fisher imposed strict rules at home, insisting that the walls be painted only white and allowing only a few pictures to be hung. Several times Mary's mother made special things like quilts, but Mary was not allowed to hang them up. She had to store them in the closet. Despite these behaviors, Fisher tried to maintain an image as a devoted family man. However, the Fisher family's seemingly perfect life took a devastating turn in April 2001. On the morning of April 10, 2001, at around 8:30 a.m., emergency services began receiving multiple calls about a house fire in their neighborhood. The house in question belonged to the Fishers. Initially, it was believed that the family might have been inside, and the fire was possibly caused by a gas leak or a stove left on. Upon extinguishing the fire, the bodies of Mary, Brittany, and Bobby were found in their beds, but Robert was missing. This led to an intense search for him, initially hoping he was unaware of the tragedy. However, as hours turned into days and then weeks, Robert Fisher's disappearance made him the prime suspect in the investigation. Neighbors reported hearing a loud argument between Mary and Robert the night before the fire, around 10:30 p.m. This was not unusual, as their arguments had become a regular occurrence. Years earlier, Robert had suffered a back injury and sought massages to alleviate the pain. While Mary was away on a retreat with the children, Robert allegedly visited a place of prostitution or met with a woman he had been seeing. This incident caused significant guilt for Robert, a devout Christian, and he eventually confessed to Mary. The confession led to a major crisis in their marriage, but they decided to attend counseling through their church in an attempt to mend their relationship. Despite counseling, the arguments continued. Neighbors noted that Mary was often the louder one during these fights, frequently expressing her frustration and pain over the betrayal. The investigation revealed that Robert was captured on a surveillance camera at a nearby ATM at 10:45 p.m. on the night of the fire, withdrawing $280. The footage also showed his Toyota 4Runner in the background. The amount withdrawn was considered the maximum allowed at that time, leading to speculation about his motives. The discovery of this withdrawal, coupled with the violent nature of the crime scene, pointed towards Robert Fisher as the main suspect. Despite an extensive manhunt, Robert Fisher remains a fugitive, and his whereabouts are unknown. The tragic events left the Fisher family shattered, and the community continues to seek justice for Mary, Brittany, and Bobby. When the autopsies were performed on the charred bodies of Mary and her two children, they found that Mary had been injured in two ways. Her throat had been slashed, nearly decapitating her, and she had been shot in the head. The children's throats had also been cut, nearly decapitating them as well. This happened, they say, on the night the neighbors heard the argument. Many believe that the screams the neighbors heard were not from the fight itself, but from the actual moment of the murders. The bodies were found in the morning, about 10 hours after they had been killed, when the house exploded. How did the house explode? Investigators say that a gas line was left open in the house's oven. A lit candle was placed in the hallway, and over those 10 hours, as the house filled with gas, it eventually reached the candle, causing the explosion. Robert became the main suspect, especially because he disappeared after the incident and never reappeared, making it obvious to the police that he was involved. Many thought that with his knowledge as a firefighter and his work in mechanics, he believed there would be no evidence left to incriminate him. They assumed he might have planned to make it seem like he was also inside the house, and due to the fire's intensity, his body wouldn't be found. This, they thought, was his way of escaping the situation. But why would he murder his own family? There are many theories, but the most focused one in this case is that he didn't want to allow a divorce from Mary. As I mentioned earlier, Robert experienced his parents' divorce when he was very young, which hit him very hard. Friends who knew him said he often mentioned he would never let his children go through what he had endured. In the days leading up to the incident, Robert had been unfaithful to Mary, and although she forgave him once, he cheated again. Mary, realizing this, decided it was enough and sought a divorce. Some friends mentioned that just days before, Mary had explained her plans to divorce Robert and that she was determined to go through with it. This decision did not sit well with Robert, who didn't want his children to experience the trauma of divorce. This led him to act as he did, believing that if he couldn't have Mary and his children, no one else could. Regarding Robert's personality, many would think he was a normal man with a wonderful family life, but that wasn't the case. Over time, some of his peculiar behaviors became apparent. For instance, he had a strange and intense passion for hunting. Friends recounted that once, after killing an animal during a hunt, he smeared its blood all over his face and body in a bizarre manner. On another occasion, while fishing, he reportedly dived into the water with a knife in his mouth and began stabbing fish to catch them, which was quite unusual. Additionally, he struggled with the disappointment of not being able to join the firefighters or the U.S. Navy due to a back problem, which seemed to weigh heavily on him. Moreover, those who knew him more intimately spoke of his controlling nature. Mary had confided in her mother-in-law that Robert's controlling behavior made her feel very strange and uncomfortable. His mother acknowledged that she had divorced Robert's father for similar reasons, as he had been equally controlling. There were also reports of Robert being extremely harsh with his children, pushing them to share his passion for hunting and forcing them to learn about and handle firearms. These behaviors painted a picture of a man with deep-seated issues, ultimately leading to the tragic events that unfolded. On one occasion, while hunting, he approached a family having a picnic and fired shots into the air to scare them. Several years before his wife and children were murdered, Fisher shot a stray pit bull. He claimed that he shot it because it attacked his Labrador retriever, but police maintained that he orchestrated the encounter because he wanted to shoot the dog. Fisher had been an active participant in the Scottsdale Baptist Church's men's ministry, but, in contrast to Mary, had begun to withdraw from church activities a few months prior to the murders. According to some of Fisher's friends, Fisher spoke of committing suicide around 1998 when he despaired over the condition of his marriage. In 1998, the Fishers went to the senior pastor for marital counseling. Robert gradually distanced himself from the marriage counseling provided by the church, which contributed to the deterioration of his marriage. To many, they appeared to be a perfect family, especially in front of the church. Mary's father even believed for a long time that Robert was completely innocent because he was always so good with the kids and portrayed the image of a wonderful father. Mary never shared the troubles she faced in her marriage with her father. He couldn't comprehend that Robert could harm his wife and children, believing instead that Robert had been kidnapped. When the police presented evidence, Mary's father was in disbelief but began seeking justice for his daughter. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 years after the incident without seeing justice served. Further investigation revealed that Robert had multiple facets to his personality, suggesting a significant personality disorder. In some home videos, he is seen instructing his daughter to smile, smile more, be very happy, then act scared and pull her hair. His behavior is peculiar, and at one point he orders Mary to turn off the camera, looking at her harshly. In another disturbing video, he has his children parade around with firearms, almost pointing one at Mary to make her turn off the camera. These clues led the police to consider Robert Fisher the sole person of interest, eventually placing him on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. By April 20th of the same year, several days after the incident, his Toyota truck was found in the National Forest where he was seen withdrawing money from an ATM. Near the passenger door, a large pile of human excrement was discovered, leading investigators to believe he was hiding in the area, possibly in one of the many caves. Reports of sightings began to surface, with one couple claiming they saw him walking along Young Road days before the truck was found. Some speculated he had hidden in a cave and perished, while others found it odd that his beloved dog, Blue, stayed by the truck for about 5 days without food or water. This led to confusion about why Robert left the dog there and whether it indicated anything about his state of mind or plans. On July 19th, an official arrest warrant was issued for Robert Fisher on charges of first-degree murder and arson. A $100,000 reward was offered for information leading to his capture, with many believing he was alive and living under a new identity. Descriptions of Robert emphasized his average appearance, a white male with light eyes and blonde hair. However, his distinctive walk due to back surgery, a surgery scar, and a gold crown on one of his teeth could help identify him. The public was warned that Fisher was considered armed and dangerous. The police also released age-progressed images to show how he might look now, aiding the public in identifying him. The police began to question whether Robert Fisher had planned his actions premeditatedly, but they discovered that it might not have been the case. His actions suggested a mix of surprise and a determined effort to flee and avoid capture. A truck driver reported helping a man who closely resembled Robert Fisher after the man's car broke down. Another testimony came from a woman who saw a man resembling Fisher. While she went to the bathroom, the man ordered a drink and stared at the fireplace for a long time. On the same night, another woman arrived at a hostel, asking for shelter because her boyfriend had just left her. The two women described the man similarly, raising suspicions that someone might have helped him escape, possibly a lover. Despite all this, the police doubted that Fisher could survive long-term in the wilderness, even though he enjoyed hunting and fishing. They considered the possibility of suicide, a common outcome for those who commit such crimes against their families. However, no body was found, leading many to believe he might be living in South America. Some think he might be in Mexico, where he could live off cash without needing a credit card, while others suggest he might be in Brazil, using his medical knowledge. A woman visiting Guatemala in 2009 took selfies where a man resembling Fisher appeared in the background. He confronted her, demanding the camera and the deletion of the photos. She later reported the incident, but the police couldn't confirm if it was him. In 2001, a man called a program called Most Wanted, claiming to be Robert Fisher, saying they would never find him. The police doubted the call's authenticity. In 2004, a man in Canada with a striking resemblance to Fisher was detained. When Robert's former neighbor saw him, he was convinced it was Fisher. The man had the same scar on his back and a missing gold tooth. However, fingerprint analysis proved it wasn't him. Despite these setbacks, the police continue to receive numerous sightings, but only a few have been somewhat credible. They urge anyone who sees someone resembling Robert Fisher to contact the authorities immediately, especially in Latin America, where he might be hiding. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.